This is Mary Herlihy. This is my story of harassment. I have many of them, but this is just one, and it's a little bit long. I'm going to make it as quick as possible. I was living in New York, New Jersey. It was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was moving back down to the city after having moved upstate to take the bar exam. So I just passed the bar exam. I was coming back to the city, and I found an ad online. It said room for rent in New Jersey. It was in a house in New Jersey, which was fine with me. It was close to the city. It was an easy commute time, had parking, had everything that I was looking for, and was within my budget. It was cheap. It was also a weekly rate, and I thought that's great because I want to look around. I want to make sure this is a place that's going to work for me. I don't want to make any commitments right away. So I called the number, and the guy who answered ended up being a lawyer in Manhattan. I thought, oh, well, this is a nice coincidence. We chatted a little bit about bar exam, about law school, and I said, okay, well, I'm interested in the room that's advertised. He said, right, the room that's advertised and I said, yes, in the house in New Jersey. He's like, yeah, right. Well, why don't you come to my office? And I thought, come to your office? I said, where's your office? He said, Manhattan. And I said, why would I come to your office in Manhattan if I'm interested in renting you the room? The room is in New Jersey, right? In a house in New Jersey. He said, yeah, well, but why don't you just come to my office in Manhattan because, there's other apartments here. And he started going on, and I just said, no, I'm interested in the house, in the room that's advertised. It was like $100 a week. It was super cheap. And I'd like to see that room. And so after a little bit more kind of beating around the bush, he's like, okay, fine. I'll meet you at the house in New Jersey later, and I'll show you the room. So we agreed to meet later on. It was a few hours later. I planned to just go there, look at the room, and then find a hotel or something and continue my search, decide, not on the spot, not right away. I didn't plan to stay there right away at all. But I got to the room, met him there. He seemed nice enough. A lawyer after hours. He dressed really sloppily, kind of a slob. The house wasn't the nicest, but it was cheap and it was close. It had parking. It was all right, And I said, so I'd be staying here, and he said, yeah, you'd be staying here, and there's another guy who lives here. He does the maintenance. He lives up in the attic. You'll never see him. He's kind of weird. He's from Argentina, but he's a nice enough guy. I said, okay, well, I can handle that. The maintenance guy living in the attic. I said, is there anyone else? And he said, no, it would just be you staying in this room. And I said, okay, well, it's nice enough. It's a little bit small, but it seemed like it would be all right. And I said, thanks, nice meeting you. I'll see you later. And he's like, wait, where are you going? I said, well, I'm leaving. I'm going to go, find, I'll be in touch with you if this works for me. I was planning to go to a hotel, stay there for a few days or a week, however long I wanted to stay until I felt like I found a place where I was comfortable, whatnot. But he said, no, don't go to, you don't have another place to stay? And I said, well, no, I'm going to go to a hotel. And he's like, no, stay here. You'll save money. You can stay here for free. Stay here for free. You can think about it. If it doesn't work, then go. And it was getting late. It was like 9 o'clock by then. And he said, why don't you come with me? Why don't you come with me to the pizza place, which is just on the corner? He's like, we can talk a little bit more. You can think about it. And I said, well, okay. So we went to the pizza place. He ate 2 big greasy slices of pizza. Nothing against pizza, but I was not in the mood for that at the time. I drank a Coke, and we talked a little bit more, and I thought, well, this seems like a decent enough sort of guy. The lawyer, he even discussed like giving me some temporary work while I was waiting to hear my bar exam results. I thought this could be good networking. I'll get to know lawyers. And so I agreed. I thought, okay, well, I'll stay in the room for tonight. We'll see how it goes. I'll leave in the morning. By then it was like 10 or 11. So I agreed to stay in the room that night. And coincidentally, he also decided to stay in the house that night. I hadn't gotten a square answer from him about whether or not he lived there. And I also couldn't, I never really got an answer about who owned the place. He said, no, I'm just renting it. Like he was, a realtor of some sort, which he ended up being. He said, no, my uncle owns the house. I said, your uncle? Where's your uncle? Does he live here? And he said, no, my uncle, he lives in Venezuela. It's like, oh, so your uncle's in Venezuela, but he wants you to rent the house for him. I was like, okay, whatever. I said, will I ever see this uncle? No, 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 no. He's never coming back. I thought, okay. So stayed in the room for the night. Was a little bit uneasy about sleeping in a new place. He ended up staying in the room right next door to mine, where previously he had said someone else was staying, but then he said that guy is, oh no, he's moving out. And I never saw that other guy, but at some point in the next few days, he came and got his stuff and his computer, and then that room was conveniently empty. So I continued my search, looked around at other few places, and thought, well, this place is cheap. But the biggest problem was this guy did not leave me alone. Phoned me all the time, texted me, where are you? What are you doing now? Where are you going to be tonight? What are you going to do tonight? Who do you know? Where, all of these questions. And he knew I was new to the city. That's why he had advertised that room, obviously. Um, and and he the texts never stopped, the phone calls never stopped, and things just got worse and worse. Pretty soon he was staying in the room next door all the time, and then he just started bombarding me 2-3 in the morning at all hours. Wouldn't leave me alone. uh, you know Came into, knocking on my door all the time. He was just there all the time, and I thought, Jesus, this is not what I am interested in. This is not what I wanted, and I couldn't get away. Once he had his claws in, it was constant all the time. He, started telling me these stories about his family. He said his family owned all of the houses on that block. Made me think, is Spanish speaking. I speak very little Spanish, so I felt immediately outnumbered. I really felt trapped, like I couldn't get away. And he also started telling me more about his uncle, and he's like, yeah, well, you can put your things where you want, but don't look over there and don't look there. And he's like, just don't look in those drawers. Like, obviously I'm gonna look in the drawers and the bureau that's in the room that I'm renting. Looked in there, and what was there? But there was a gun. I'd never seen a gun before. He obviously intended for me to see it, intended for me to be threatened by it. And here I was, like, my mind was racing. I was just going in circles. Here I was, this educated, capable woman, strong woman. I was like, I can deal with this. I can handle this. He didn't mean anything by it. It's just a gun. But then, the phone calls wouldn't stop. The text wouldn't stop. The knocking on my door wouldn't stop. And then eventually, like, I just thought, he's like, well, why don't we try sharing a room for a little while? I was like, no, 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 I'm not. I want nothing to do with you. I should have been long gone by then. And then, eventually he pressured me into doing sexual favors for him. I really felt like I was pressured into doing it at gunpoint. Strange other things started to happen. I found the IDs of other girls in the room where he was forcing me to do these things. He would get strange phone calls from girls, be like, oh, it was this girl I used to know. She moved upstate. I guess she's having legal problems now. And I realized that was his modus operandi. He was a lawyer. He knew exactly what he was doing, and used his connections in the courts, as I would later find out with the cops, to trap girls into this situation. Eventually, I after a couple of weeks, I ended the whole thing. Demanded locks be put on the room that I was renting. was really in this situation where I thought, I can handle this. I'm not going to let him get away with this. I won't just move out because he's threatening me. And that's exactly what he started doing. After I refused to let him in my room in the middle of the night, he said, this will go on your permanent record. You will never find another place to live. I tried calling the housing authority, telling them what was going on. I tried the cops. No one returned my calls. I couldn't get through to anyone. They said, oh, that's not our county. This is not our business. This is not our problem. Try calling this other number. It just kept getting the runaround. Eventually, that was in the fall, late fall. Eventually, he just stopped coming to the house. I was staying there. I was kind of going about my business, moving on. And the house started to break down. Eventually, the boiler broke, so we had no hot water and no electricity. It was one of the coldest winters we had ever had. And no, I'm sorry, we had no water. Eventually, the pipes burst. There was no water. Eventually, there was no plumbing. So I was trying to call the housing authority. They were still I was still paying rent to them. I tried to call the housing authority to tell them what was going on. Again, none of my calls got through. I just got the runaround, and eventually, in the middle of the night, I fled. As soon as I found another place to stay that I could afford, I was like, I'm out of here. I'm gone. Left. I had all of my possessions from a one-room apartment that I'd had in storage. I had them all moved into the house. The guys quite conveniently had helped me. Little did I know that they had planned to steal everything from me, because as soon as I left, they changed the locks, and that was their plan. Here they had me on their list. I was never going to find another place to live. I called the cops. I told them the situation. They said, we can't get you back into the house to get your things. That'd be breaking and entering. I went to the courts. I told them what had happened. They said, well, the best you can do is, file for a court order to get back into the house. When that came, by the time it got through the court system, it was 2 or 3 months later. It was too late. They said, you can't get your things back. You can sue to get the value of your things back, which was like stuff I had had for 10, 15 years. And, things that were mine, on top of everything else they had just done. I ended up not getting anything back, not getting any money compensation for anything that they stole from me. And 5 or 6 months later, after staying there, which I wouldn't have, not in the house, but in another apartment nearby, while I waited to get my time in court, I had to see the guy in court again, and he knew exactly what he was doing, manipulated the whole thing. I had an unprovable case. I had evidence of having paid rent, but the court said no. Actually, it was the second judge. The first day I went to court, when it was originally scheduled, I sat there in court I was one of the first people there that morning, from 8 a.m. until the court closed at 6. Conveniently, they kept bumping my case and then passed me to a different judge, who denied me any of the relief that I sought. And on top of that, I had to see this guy who had, forced sexual favors from me, basically at gunpoint. There was the court taking his side. The other guy who had been living in the house, the guy from Argentina, who this guy blamed all of this on, conveniently didn't show up for court. So it was, this story can go on and on. Basically, I was forced to do sexual favors at gunpoint by a lawyer who had connections in the courts, connections with the judges, connections with the cops, who got away with it. I'm not the first person he did that to. After that court session, I took off, and I went back for my brother's wedding, but I haven't been back since. And every time I've tried to call, I've gotten the runaround. I've tried in Los Angeles to tell the police what happened. They said, no, you have to take it up with them in New Jersey where it happened. And I mean, it's too traumatic of a situation to follow up with. So that's briefly my story of harassment. There's been no relief, no justice. I'm completely disillusioned, brand new lawyer, completely disillusioned with the court system, the legal system, judges, the cops, everybody who is involved there. Thanks.